My name is Yngvill, and I run a small studio called Henchman Goon out of Bergen, which is a very wet city in the western part of Norway. I'm first and foremost a visual artist, and I originally come from traditional art, but I ended up in games because games are cool. I'm still an artist though, and I went and got myself a degree in concept art a bunch of years ago. The main difference now is that I work in a team, which I really enjoy. 11-ish years ago, I co-founded Henchman Goon with a fairly large group of friends, mostly right out of uni. Since then, we've launched 3 games: Phlegm, which is a small 2D platformer for PC, Pod, which is the biggest and most ambitious game we've launched so far for PC and console, and Pod Kids, which is an activity app for children, which we launched on Google Play last summer. We're also currently, we have 3 games in progress at different stages, but I'm not going to talk about any of those. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pod. We started working on Pod in 2015, roughly 3 years after we founded Henchman Goon, and we spent 3 years making it. For most of the time, we were about 4 people working on it, with the addition of 1 or 2 people from time to time, until the last 6 months of development, when we were fortunate enough to be able to grow our team to 7 people for the remaining development, plus audio and music people. Pod launched on Nintendo Switch in June of 2018, and it tanked. We were so disappointed, and fair to say that summer wasn't particularly fun for any of us. But things ended up turning around, and I'm going to get back to that a little bit later. Before I continue, I want to go back a little and tell you a bit about where I come from. I grew up in a family of artists, musicians, actors, and all sorts of creative people. I have been making art for as long as I can remember, and the idea of artistic success has been present in my life just as long. I decided very early that I wanted to live off my art, and as soon as that becomes an option, you also start looking at what it means to be a successful or a failed artist. And you get sort of competitive and protective of your art, your style, and your idea of what a successful artist might be. I'm no different from anyone else, so I certainly went through that whole phase of being a young, arrogant, pretentious artist. I identified myself with the idea of what I thought an artist should be, and to be honest, when we're young, we often get those ideas by looking at the cliches. One of those cliches is the notion that you should suffer for your art. You should pour all of yourself into your art. Don't let regular life come in the way of artistic greatness and all that nonsense. And when someone suggests that you may need to pay attention to something other than the art, like getting a paying job, sometimes we can kind of get a little bit defensive. Why should I have to do anything but create art from the depths of my soul, right? My mom never had the patience for any of that, so she simply told me, Yngvill, artists too need to eat. Now, you can take that statement literally. We all need to eat, we know this. But in the context that this was said, it meant a lot more than that. It meant that I wasn't different from anyone else, and we all need to do what it takes to function as humans, both with regards to our physical needs and as part of the society that we live in. We can't simply decide to be something and claim the privilege to be released from all other responsibilities. So artists too need to eat. That statement from my mom kind of pulled me down to earth at a time where I needed that to happen. It stuck with me, and I've brought that with me into everything I've done since, including starting up Henchman Goon, which becomes important later in the story. So fast forward again to the founding of Henchman Goon. Like I mentioned, we were mostly right out of uni when we started Henchman Goon. Some of us had been freelancing for a bit, and we knew a little bit about running a small business. But for the most part, we were kind of oblivious to what setting off on this adventure would mean. We had a bunch of reasons why we wanted to run our own studio. We wanted creative freedom, We all had our own ideas that we wanted to see realized. We wanted to keep working with each other, with our friends, and we wanted to build something for ourselves. However, first and foremost, we wanted to make games, and there were no local jobs available. Not just jobs, there were hardly any studios where I come from. So starting our own studio was basically our only choice if we wanted to stay in our hometown without giving up on our dreams. So there we were, a whole bunch of really inexperienced game developers deciding to go pro. Where do you begin with something like that? Well, making a plan seems like a good way to start. And the first thing on this plan is to survive. Making art, making games, takes time. So in order to do that, we needed to survive in the meantime. We spent the first 3 years doing contract work and having jobs on the side. And by contract work, I mean stuff like designing menus for local restaurants and making book covers and stuff like that. All the while making a tiny little game for ourselves in the moments between. We were okay with this because we knew we had a plan. We were working towards a goal, and the ultimate goal was no contract work, all in-house games all the way. Anyway, we finally launched Phlegm almost 3 years after we founded Henchman Goon. We sort of expected there to be some profit here. We made the calculations, and based on the tiny budget that we spent, we figured that it wouldn't take many sales for us to recoup and make a little bit extra. That didn't happen, of course, but it wasn't a huge disappointment. We'd made and we shipped something, and that felt good. It had also been a bit of an experiment to make something for ourselves, so we took it like as a learning experience and kept moving forward. However, we were no longer in the honeymoon phase, so we had to start thinking of what direction to take. People were getting a bit tired of having to work on the side. We'd started some other projects that didn't pan out. It was difficult getting project funding, and there was an increasing disagreement of where to focus our energy in the studio. We'd started to build a pretty good customer base with all the contract work we'd been doing, and some of the founders discovered that they were more interested in moving towards software development than game development. We'd gotten some bigger, more serious clients over the years, and there was the prospect of delivering some quite interesting solutions to the offshore sector, which can be quite lucrative business to be in. So at this point, we decided that we would be better off splitting the company in half instead of having two groups within the company pulling in different directions. And that's what we did. No drama, it was all very friendly. We even stayed in the same offices, sharing people and projects when we needed to. Those who stayed started working on Pod while continuing doing commissions and having jobs on the side. And we just kept working towards that end goal that was still no commissions, all full-time in-house work. We'd been working on finding external funding for various projects since starting Henchman Goon. It was about 4 years since we founded the company, and we were still doing all the things that we thought we wouldn't do anymore. Commissions, jobs on the side, and all that stuff that wasn't making games. We were still living hand to mouth and still had no profit to show for it, but we didn't have nothing. We had built some value. We'd built a solid team of people who cared about each other and worked well together. We had proof we could finish and ship projects. We had spent a lot of time building a large network of people who supported and believed in us. And all that hard work resulted in project funding that enabled us to finish Pod. We still had to do some work on the side and hustle for more funding from time to time, but we got to spend 3 years mostly focusing on finishing our project. They were 3 years of joy, tears, stress, and excitement. And that feeling when you ship something you've agonized over for years is indescribable. So when it doesn't turn out the way you expect, it's absolutely heartbreakingly devastating. The story that we're often told as developers is that a game has to sell more than 10,000, 20,000, or whatever number of copies at launch to be a success. And by success, we of course mean recouping and making a profit. So much time and resources and love had gone into this project compared to any other we'd done, and the feeling of failure was on a whole other level. We told ourselves that this would be the thing that pushed us over the hill. Everything would get easier if we just got to that launch date. But it wasn't just that. This project included a lot more people than just ourselves. We had employees and investors and partners with royalty agreements who all depended on us. So the feeling of failure was accompanied by the feeling of letting all these people down. And it's almost like dealing with a loss. You put all your love and energy into creating something beautiful, and then it dies the moment it comes into the world. So you start second-guessing yourself and wonder whether there's any point to continue. You know, are we really supposed to suffer this much for our art? However, we'd been doing this for 6 years at this point, and while we contemplated whether or not we had a future, we did what we knew. We went back to doing commissions, we started a new project, we took jobs on the side. We just went back to surviving. And while we survived, something peculiar started to happen. The expectations when you launch a game is that you'll sell a lot in the first few weeks or maybe months, and then you'll see a large drop-off. So when you have bad numbers in those first few weeks, you expect it to drop to nothing, and that recoup is a far-gone dream. What we saw happening with Pod was hardly any drop-off at all. And after some time, we figured that if this continued, we might just hit that recoup milestone yet. So now we kind of had to regroup and figure out the way forward again. But we also shifted our perspective a bit, and we started thinking in way of priorities instead of plans. We'd been doing the same thing over and over for years, and it wasn't working. Well, it was sort of working. We were still alive, but the question was, do we want to spend all our time chasing some idea of success while surviving disappointment after disappointment? So we got a little introspective and looked at what we had instead. We had a team of friends who cared about each other. We had a community that believed in us and wanted to support us. We had a company and project we cared about, and we had the desire to make games together. And we came up with this new list of priorities. So this sounds very clear-cut, of course, which it wasn't. It's not a shift from one day to another, but there was a shift in perspective that gradually led to a clearer and clearer way to prioritize. However, for simplicity's sake, we came up with a new list of priorities. We needed to survive, of course. You can't make anything if your basic needs aren't met. Most importantly, we wanted to enjoy every day of our work life while making beautiful art and fun and interesting games. And we didn't want to chase an imaginary thing that might come true sometime in the future. So let me break down what this list means for us. Survival. To survive means to love and care for each other. It means that every person in the group works to create an environment where we all feel safe and happy. To feel safe and happy, people need a few basic things. They need a decent salary, food and shelter. They need time for a social life, family and friends. They need time for themselves, and they need to feel heard and valued. Sometimes that means slowing down development if it's taking a toll. It means we need to allow people to be unproductive. Sometimes we're all down and uninspired, and we need room to get through that so we can bounce back instead of burning out. And it means creating a space for people to be inspired and give their best when they can. In other words, it means putting people first and projects second. Enjoy life and make art. You've probably all heard the saying, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. And that's kind of what this point represents. The reason we got into game development in the first place was because we are creative people who like making things. It's what we spent our free time doing before we made it our jobs. If the work becomes nothing more but time-pressed tasks on the way to finishing a product, and the bright spots of your career are the days you finish something, what's the point? However, if you love the thing you make and enjoy the process of making it, you look back and feel happy and accomplished. Another side of this is that all the work that comes after you launch something will be much easier if you have this relationship with your work. Porting to new platforms, cultivating a community, marketing and PR, you'll be able to have fun doing that stuff too. And lastly, let's see what happens. The thing about disappointment is that it's really just a result of reality not living up to your expectations. If you manage your expectations, you're less likely to get disappointed. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't do what you can to have a successful launch, or that you should be a pessimist about everything. It means you should have a plan for how to proceed if that launch doesn't bring in the cash to solve all your problems. Have a plan for how to survive if everything fails, for how to keep your people and yourself happy and safe in the face of disappointment. So while we focused on what we needed to do to survive and tried to get better at just enjoying the work in the process, pod numbers kept getting better. And 2021, we had the best summer since launch. 2022 was even better, and we came back from summer vacation discovering that we had recouped ahead of our estimations. For reference, the first few years, we saw about a 20% drop in sales from year to year. In 2022, we had a 26.5% increase compared to 2021. And this trend looks like it's continuing into 2023. So now we're getting kind of confused, right? This isn't what's supposed to happen. It's not how things work, right? So why are the numbers behaving this way? There are, of course, a number of things that we did to try to affect the numbers. We kept launching on new platforms. We set up community events. We were present at conventions and conferences. We set up discounts as often as we could, and we tried to be generally active and responsive with regards to our online community. Nothing really groundbreaking, though, basically just maintaining our product. So we tried to figure out what was happening here, because if there is a recipe for reproduction, that would be great, right? The conclusion we came to is that we actually did make a good product, which almost sounds kind of dumb and self-congratulatory, but I'm building to a point, I promise. So Pod has a good Metascore, good reviews, good ratings, good feedback, and an absolutely lovely community. The thing is that all of this is incredibly easy to overlook if you measure your success by copies sold and money made. It's easy to give up and to stop maintaining something that you think has failed. And I think there are a lot of good games out there that fall into that category. We all work in an industry that is notorious for pushing people to the brink. We are often so focused on these milestones and launch dates and sales numbers that we forget why people choose to work in this industry in the first place. And one of the reasons we're so good at pushing ourselves is because we're also incredibly passionate about what we do. We want to keep doing it. We want to get better at it. We want to deliver. We want to have our work out there. We want our art to be recognized, and we're a bit too ready to suffer for it. And this is where I come back to what my mom told me. Artists too need to eat, and what it represents for me. It helps me take a step back and remember that reaching these goals isn't worth anything if I don't survive, or if it takes away the joy of the process. The way we try to implement this in how we run our studio, and what I hope that you'll be able to take away from this talk, is set goals for your life, not your products. Enjoy the work. Take care of yourself and the people around you. And this one is the most important one. Plan for a way to fail comfortably so you don't feel like giving up just because things don't turn out the way you hope to. And give yourself some slack, because you really, really, really do not have to be number one to be a success. Thank you all so much for coming. I think we have time for questions, if there are any. Don't be shy. Okay, I'm moving on to, one question here, right? Yeah?
Yes, thank you for the inspiring talk. And now with all these lessons, so like what are you doing now? Like what's happening future with these takeaways?
What's happening with our studio in the future? Yeah. Well, like I said, we're working on 3 different projects right now, and one of these is our kind of main thing that we're trying to finish and get funded right now. I think the way these things kind of affect that is that this project it's taken a lot longer for us to finish than we wanted it to, because we've been very conscious every step of the way not to put too much pressure on the team and try to kind of take that step back and look at, okay, if things are moving too fast, if things are getting too difficult, then we need to put a break on things and figure out what we need to do before we move forward. Yeah.
I guess I don't have a question. I just want to say congrats on being a success.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Given what you know now about how Pode's sales kind of graph goes, would you have done anything different, or what would you have done different, like leading up to the launch of it?
I think so. I think one of the conclusions that we've come to is that we were a very young studio making this game, and it was our first really big project, and we decided to self-publish. So we did everything ourselves. And of course, doing that, not knowing how to do things, you're bound to make some mistakes. So I think what we would have done different now is to try to we would have probably tried to find a publisher, even if it's someone that doesn't put money into the project, but finding someone who knows how to do a game launch and how to get visibility. Because, of course, if we'd had better numbers at launch and imagining that the curve was the same, we still would have done better than what we actually did. I think you're next.
Congratulations on your success and
Thank
endurance.
you.
You mentioned that one of your greatest assets that you didn't realize you had, but you do now, was your community that supported you. How did you build that community?
Stuff like this. We've always been it's been important to us to be kind of present at community events. So we've been working very hard to just get to know everybody in the Norwegian game community, and also like going to conferences and conventions. And I think it's easy to when you come to the point that you are a developer, you've released something, you've done something, it's easy to kind of ignore people who you look at as kind of not as skilled or that haven't accomplished these things. And for us, it's always been very important to like not ignore anyone, because you never know where like wisdom comes from, basically. So like welcome everybody who wants to be part of it, and try to kind of just like be there for everyone, for your fans, for the players, and just for students, for whoever. Like let everybody be part of that journey, I think.
Hey, thanks so much for the talk. My question is regarding kind of the dual priorities of wanting to maintain this really kind of healthy workspace where you can kind of take things at the pace that you're able to in the moment, but then also still the continued goal of like no contracting, no commissions. I guess what's been your experience in kind of trying to balance those two goals for like satisfaction?
Well, actually, I think that goal has changed, because as we've been doing more and more contract work, we've been getting more and more interesting jobs. So right now we're working with other game studios on really cool projects. We're working with like orchestras to create visuals for their concerts. And so we get to do more interesting stuff. So I think that goal has changed to just like, it's not no more contracts, but just like, let's find the coolest, most interesting contracts we can get, and let's do awesome projects with awesome people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Congrats on pushing over and keep at it.
Thank you.
Because I know it's very hard. How do you approach publishers to be able to like fund or pitch your game
So how we approach publishers to get our games published, reach out however you can, send them emails, talk to them on like events like this. We just try to put ourselves out there and don't be like, not be shy, not be afraid of getting a no, because I think that's something that a lot of people, they're afraid that they're going to get a negative answer, and then they don't try. And that's what kind of the biggest thing that you need to overcome, I think.
Thank you.
Hi, what was your paid advertising strategy for Pod at launch? And now that you've recouped and made some profit, have you been reinvesting in that sort of user acquisition, and how has that strategy changed?
Oh, a lot of questions. So what was our budget and strategy for marketing?
Yeah.
We got an investor in that was like 6 months before we launched, and they put in a marketing budget. So we were able to hire a PR studio to do the marketing for us, help us with press outreach, and create press releases and stuff like that. So we got kind of the help that we needed on that front, which was very helpful, because we definitely wouldn't have been able to reach out to the press the way that we did if we hadn't used a studio for that.
And are you still marketing the game today?
Sorry?
Are you still marketing the game today?
Yeah, so we do, like I said, we do a lot of, not necessarily high budget stuff, but we do discounts, we do events, we launch on platforms when we can. We kind of try to always be relevant and be present on social media and stuff like that. And from time to time we do paid advertisements, but usually very low budget stuff. But it seems to be enough to kind of just keep things rolling and just like get to the critical mass where stuff starts happening by itself.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It was really
Thank you.
cool to hear. You mentioned how when you started, there was basically no game industry in Norway. And that was my experience as well when I moved away like 10 years ago. There were basically nothing. But there's always been a lot more in, for example, Denmark and Sweden, I think. So 2 questions. One, like, why do you think that is? Where does that difference come from? And is it different today?
Oh, well, it's definitely, so the question is, why is the Swedish and Danish industry so much bigger, and if it's still like that today? It is definitely still like that today. The Norwegian industry is very small, and I don't know if I have a good answer for why it's like that, but there has definitely been a lot of work from the Swedish and Danish governments to kind of push those industries forward. And there is a lot of interesting stuff happening in Norway as well. We have gotten a lot more attention from the government in the later years, and there's definitely, we're seeing kind of the fruits of that now. There is growth definitely, and there is a lot more interesting stuff coming out of Norway as well. So hopefully it's going to kind of level out a little bit. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to come to the level of especially the Swedish industry.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I have a question actually very much along the same lines. I'm also from a part of Canada that is not where the bulk of the industry is. Most people would tell me just move to Montreal if you want to continue to try to do business and games in Canada. And I really want to try and grow games in my little, similar to Bergen, but in Canada. It's not where the hub is.
Yeah.
I wondered if you've had any challenges or had people, suggest the same to you, that you shouldn't try to make it work in Bergen, or have you done anything locally to try and help grow games there as well?
Yeah, there definitely was in the beginning kind of people who like, well, why don't you just like help build the industry in Oslo because it's already bigger. There's, closer to the government, all of that stuff. But I think, so people from Bergen are pretty stubborn. So when somebody tells them to not do something, we definitely do it. But we did. So first of all, we started very early to just like have gatherings with everyone in Bergen who wanted to work in the games industry, and we've built like we started the Norwegian Game Developers Guild from Bergen. We have started a conference in Bergen, so we have kind of this history of creating a community, like actively creating a community to make it happen, and that has definitely helped kind of bring more interest to Bergen, and more people want to come to Bergen because we kind of have that community. So I think the best place to start is just like gather people, create a community, and just do cool stuff together, basically.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joshua. I'm from East Asia Soft. We are a publisher. We publish about 150 games a year between PC and consoles. And one of the most rewarding things about my job is reaching out to indies who might not be able to reach certain platforms on their own or certain regions on their own. But you didn't do that. You apparently ended up doing all of it yourself. So I know you had to come up against some challenges with that. How did you approach it, getting access to the platforms and the dev kits and everything that you needed to come to consoles?
The hard way.
It is hard.
I mean, I've like chased down people from Sony, and it's just like being a pest, basically. I think that's my best answer.
Being determined to take your ways. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we need to get out. I think we're out of time, but I'll move on to the alcoves. I think it's just around the corner here, and if anyone wants to chat further, we can do it right there. Okay, thank you.